9.5 amends, 9 3/4 amends. Right? Little bit of work with meditation.
Shouldn't half avail us half?
Yeah, shouldn't half avail us half, he says. We stand at the turning point. Here's the turning point. I'm either going to turn and go through the rest of the steps, or I'm going to go back to my first step. So here's a prayer. God, we ask your protection, care with complete abandon. Why? Because you're going to make a decision in the third step, and to quote Big Frank, you're going into hell in the fourth step. And you're going to look at yourself. We need protection and care to this place we're going to get taken to. We're going to write these inventories and do a very, very thorough self-examination, and the ego balks upon investigation. And then we're going to have to read that with somebody, a tremendous leveling of pride. Then we're going to have to take all of those defects that we identified to this power. 7-step, given to the power. 8-step, make a list of all the people we've harmed as a result of living our life on self-will. And in the 9th, take the course of action to make those amends. That's why we need protection and care. And it uses the word complete abandon. Abandon means give up completely. You're jumping off a cliff. You don't have any idea what's below it. Why would we do that? Die an alcoholic death? Jump off the cliff. Okay, what have I got to lose? I've experienced the alcoholic death. I drank for 20 years. I know what the alcoholic death is. I've experienced that. So every time I'm left with door 1, door 2, doomed to die an alcoholic death or live on a spiritual basis. Keep it that simple. It becomes very easy to make your decision. And then here are the steps we took. I think the key words are we took them. We took the steps. We don't study the steps. Here are the steps we took, and then they go through the 12 steps. Turn over to page 60. Our description of the alcoholic, the chapter of the agnostic, and our personal ventures before drinking and after sober, right now today, make clear 3 pertinent ideas. A, I am an alcoholic and cannot manage my own life. Is that my truth? Is that my experience? B, probably no human power could have relieved my alcoholism. Do I believe that? What is my experience? Make your list of the forms of human power that you have attempted to work with. Now, by the way, they're talking about alcoholism, not alcohol. No human power. Make a list of what are the forms of human power. Children, wives, husbands, jobs, career, physical health, treatment centers, priests, nuns, you name it. Make your list of the forms of human power that you've attempted to work with to resolve your alcohol problems. Have they worked? Do they work? What is your experience? C, God could and would if he were sought. God can and will if I seek God. How do we seek God in AA? Through the steps, through the work in the steps. So being convinced, am I convinced? Now I'm at step 3. Now the book's going to get very specific in terms of steps. You probably are all aware, but this is the first time the book told us you're at a particular step. Joe and I have outlined with you how we look at the first step, how we have a first step experience. We agnostics, up through the ABCs is the second step, and now we're at step 3, which is we're going to decide to turn our will and our life over to God as we understood God. Well, what do we mean by that, and what do we do? 2 very, very important questions which will be answered. There's some great humor in this step. Here's the humor. You and I are going to make a decision to turn our will and life over to that which created our will and life. You get that? You see, think about that. We're making a decision to turn our will and life over to that which created our will and life. Our arrogance is beyond belief. See?
I offer myself to thee. What a wonderful thing.
It's like turning to your parents and saying, okay, it's now okay that you be my parents. Right? They gave birth to you, they gave you your name, they raised you. It's now okay that you be my parents. See?
How many times have you heard it, though? An alcoholic say, I'm going to let God into my life.
Why don't you go ahead, and then I'll come back and pick up.
So, just to cover, and I think before we break for lunch, I haven't expressed this to Mark, but I would love if he would do this. Before we break for lunch, I would like Mark to take us through a guided meditation of what we've covered up to step 4. Then maybe a few moments of silence for each of you in your own way to consider the third step decision, which is not the prayer. And then maybe after that silence, we can all say the third step prayer together. If before that prayer there's anybody that doesn't want to do that, please, it's your choice. But what have we covered so far? We've looked at a threefold disease that's covered in the first step. I admit that I'm powerless over alcohol physically and mentally. Once I start, because of my body, the strange reaction my body has, and that doctor's opinion has held up. Mark could tell you a lot more about this than I can because he works in the field. There has been no evidence since 1930, whatever, when he wrote the doctor's opinion, that's contrary to that belief. They have found out more details, THIQ and neurotransmitters. Joe and Charlie talk a lot about the liver creating acetone, which creates a craving for that which you've put in your body. Nothing has refuted the doctor's opinion in medical science. We have bodies that don't process alcohol in the same way as other people. But that's just head stuff. The question is, does my experience abundantly confirm that once I put alcohol in my system, something happens where I lose control over the amount? What about a periodic drinker? Can definitely be an alcoholic. Here's the question. Sometimes you have control, sometimes you don't. Here's the question though. Are you the one in control of when you lose control and when you don't? Because most periodics seem to share with me that exactly the wrong time, when they really don't want to lose control, it happens. You can also look at the idea of control and enjoy your drinking. When you controlled it, was it enjoyable? And when it was enjoyable, was there control? We went from the doctor's opinion to the top of page 23. Our book is so great that at the top of 23 they give you a review question of all of that. Now, putting aside the drink problem, I don't care if you're addict, alcoholic, overeater, Al-Anon, now we come together with the obsession. From 23 to 43, you turn those statements into questions, and it ends on 43 with a summary. Am I convinced that at a certain time there will be no mental defense against the first drink, and neither you nor any other human being or myself is going to be able to provide that defense? And am I convinced that my defense must come from a higher power? Therein lies a good reason to go on. But they're not done. And you think, wow, haven't I done really well in admitting that physically and mentally I'm powerless over what it is you're looking at? They say no. Putting aside the drink question, let's look at why you're making such a hard go of living life. 44, they review what we've covered. But they end the first paragraph with a very important question. Do I believe that I'm suffering from an illness which only a spiritual experience will conquer? Do I have any other alternatives? Do I have any other plans? And that's why the great paradox in the chapter to the wives with the 4 types of alcoholics, that's why they say type number 4 has a better chance of our program than type 1, 2, and 3. Why? Type 1, 2, and 3, it doesn't have to do with what they've lost or where they've been or however many institutions. It has to do with choice. Types 1, 2, and 3 have other alternatives still. They're not out of step 0. They haven't eliminated their alternatives. And the funny thing about going through step 1 and really getting down to the fact that you think you have 2 alternatives, die an alcoholic death or live on a spiritual basis, they're going to pull that out from under if you really go into it a little deeper. Why? Is anyone in this room been successful at dying an alcoholic death? We like to think we're the chosen ones. I like to think we're the ones that haven't paid our ticket yet and we haven't been able to quite go yet. I think a lot of alcoholics got free when they get to go. We're not done yet. Chuck Chamberlain always used to say, we haven't paid our ticket yet. Right? So, just when you think you've done a great job getting down to 2 alternatives, if you look at those 2 alternatives, you don't have the power to pull either one of them off. No one in this room has been successful at dying an alcoholic death. So I'm a failure at dying, and I'm a failure at living. Because I really think it's an alternative to live on a spiritual basis. Do you have the power to live on a spiritual basis? Is that really an alternative, that there's a choice involved? If anyone in this room could live life the way they would like to on a spiritual basis, wouldn't you have been a little more evolved than you are by now? Wouldn't you have reached enlightenment within 6 months and we'd be coming to your temple or your ashram to visit you, right? So just when I think I'm down to 2 alternatives, I realize they aren't. I'd like to throw this in there since we've looked at step 2. We've looked at the first step. The first step we've looked in 3 parts: body, mind, powerlessness; spirit, unmanageability. Now we're going to look at the second step as we have in 2 parts. Part 1. Do I now believe, or am I even willing to believe that there is a power greater than myself? A lot of new people confuse that with, like, you take the second step and the next day you have faith. It doesn't say, do you now believe, or are you even willing to believe in a power greater than yourself? It doesn't even say that at the beginning of step 2. It says, do you now believe, or are you even willing to believe that there is a power greater than yourself? I was told early on that I could come to believe in God the same way I came to believe in booze. How did I come to believe in booze? Did anyone in this room ever get drunk sitting across the street from a liquor store, studying a book about that liquor store or thinking about the liquor store? No. So what did you have to do to come to believe in alcohol? You got to ask yourself, did alcohol become a power greater than myself? Did it take me where it wanted to take me? Did it direct my life? Did it come before all else? Did anything or anyone that got in the way eliminate it? You think you're having trouble coming to believe in a power greater than yourself? You've probably had one that came before everything that you had full faith in until it quit working. So how did I come to believe in booze? I'm sitting across from the liquor store. I got to make a decision, take some action, get some results, experience the promises that alcohol provided, every promise in this big book except the ones on the other side of step 9. The only promises in this big book that never happened as the result of alcohol working were the 10th and 11th step promises. A lot of people in this program will tell you there's only 12 promises. They'll read them at the end of the meeting. And you're sitting there new, and they read the promises halfway through the 9th step, and you say to yourself, well, I'm never going to get those promises because I'm not going to get halfway through my amends. That's right. The you that comes to step 1 cannot get yourself halfway through those amends. But you can be changed and experience power to experience those promises. But there's promises at every step. There's promises in the first and second step of what will happen if you don't go on. Great promises even before the 3rd step prayer, just based on your decision and steps 1, 2, and your 3rd step decision. There's great promises before the 3rd step prayer. There's wonderful promises after a 5th step. Imagine some of us have experienced in this room, to be able to go home having withheld nothing and sit alone in perfect peace and ease. Let alone sitting alone. The committee has stopped. These personalities have begun to die. I sit alone at perfect peace and ease. The feeling that the drink problem has been removed. There's a lot of promises before the 9th step promises, and a lot that no one ever gets to experience on the other side of the 9th step promises. So, now we're going to look at the 2nd step in 2 parts. Do I now believe, or am I even willing to believe, that there is a power greater than myself? I'll give you an exercise that's very helpful with that chapter. My thought, and I've heard a lot of sponsors say this, that somewhere after that part of the 2nd step, this consideration, they call it but one short question. Do you now believe, or are you even willing to believe that there is a power greater than yourself? You should go home and do some kind of exercise to increase your belief, to add to your faith, to see how much you really believe. But I believe if you're given the right question, you can go through this chapter and you'll have a whole new experience with it. When you go through the chapter and you look and mark any word or any statement that would help you face your agnosticism, where you have doubt, to locate yourself. You start off in step 2, you think you're a big-time believer. Somebody says, how much do you believe? You say, this much. And then the book says, well, isn't about this much of it faith in people, things, sentiment, money, yourself, your mind, the alpha, the omega, and even with good motives, we can worship a sunset, the sea, or a flower can be a distraction from the experiencing God deep down within ourselves. And you see, well, maybe it's this much. And then they give you some other things. Maybe it's this much. Honest doubt, prejudice, organized religion, people, the forest from the trees. And you see that, well, I got about this much faith, and they say, good, you've located yourself by facing your agnosticism. A man came to our group one time where we're allowed to ask questions, and he said that on a regular basis, he took the suggestion from the 12 and 12 and did a yearly or a monthly spot check. He would review 1, 2, and 3. He would do 4 through 9. The group was really excited to hear somebody with that much time, and a young lady raised her hand and asked him a question. Can you share with us, from the last time you went through the steps at 25 years, the agnosticism that you faced with that many years, your current agnosticism? This guy leaned back in his chairs with his eyes like this, and he said, current agnosticism? I have no idea what you're talking about. I was only an agnostic once when I was new. And I'm thinking to myself, my God, every time through these steps I have faced different little pieces of agnosticism. And you know how you'll find your current agnosticism? By finding your current unmanageability. They're the same. My unmanageability is my alcoholism, and it is my agnosticism. They're not disconnected. Your agnosticism will lie in the truth about your current unmanageability, because your current unmanageability is where you have doubt about God coming into that area of your life, and you think you're the one that's going to have to do it, and you're struggling. The truth about the current unmanageability will be a reflection of the current agnosticism. Use the chapter to face your current agnosticism. Find words. They'll stick out to you. Then, how do you move from there to choosing God as everything? The book calls it stepping from bridge to shore. How do you make this second step choice when you've seen this agnosticism? Go through the chapter again in another color and mark any word or statement that takes you from your willingness to believe, having seen your current agnosticism, to choosing. There are statements more positive, like, as soon as someone can say they're willing, they're well on their way. Upon this simple cornerstone. There's statements that help take you, and I've had people that marked statements that helped them see their agnosticism, they turned into statements that helped them choose everything or nothing. So the second half of step 2, I'm facing my agnosticism with the proposition, do I now believe or am I willing to believe? Then I'm facing, how do I get from there to choosing God as everything? Now, if you've been around for a while, the proposition, do you now believe after all these years that there is a power greater than yourself? There's no challenge in that question. Of course you do. But do you believe that He will take you past where you are with all you've seen in step 1? Now makes the question relevant whether you're doing the work the first time or the 20th time. So you add a little to that question. Do I now believe, or am I even willing to believe, that this power that I say I have faith in, that I've had experience with, can take me past all that I've seen in step 1? Relationship, health, weight, smoking, whatever I've seen in the unmanageability. Do I believe God can take me past here? And it's kind of like considering C of the ABCs. Probably not too many people in this room have any reservations that God can, but I bet a lot of us have reservations that He will. Will He for me as I am now? And then you come to this great choice. I'd like to throw a little something in the pot. I would like to say that if you get to the second step choice and you think there's a choice, it's based on a first step reservation. If you think there's any choice in the matter at step 2 when you get to this major proposition that God is everything or nothing, if you think there's a choice involved, I believe there's still a first step reservation. And I believe if you've been around for a while, this is the time you need to look at, is fear going to be your motivator to move through the work? Or can you really fearlessly face the proposition that God is everything or nothing? If you're sitting in this room and you're still afraid of drinking again, and we'll get to this when we get to the fear inventory, if you're afraid of drinking again, I believe that fear of drinking again is rooted in an idea that you can do something on your own without God about drinking again, because fear is about self-reliance. So is it possible to fearlessly face the proposition, just like it says, we had to fearlessly face the proposition that God is everything or nothing? And if you think there's a choice, I bet there's still some first step reservations. Soon, and especially after the fifth step, and if you turn to the page that has returning home after a fifth step, They ask some questions in there where, if you have not been thorough, would be very confusing. Are the stones properly in place? What? What stones? Have you skimped on the cement? Cement? On the foundation? Foundation? For we're building an arch through which will walk a free man at last. So now it's time to talk about that structure, that arch. The foundation is really simple. The foundation is your first step. I can't tell you the number of people that I meet on a regular basis that say, my first step means to me that I can't drink. I can't drink. How far away from the first step could you possibly be? My first step is that I will drink. What do you mean you can't drink? I will drink without this power in my life. But the great fact is the power's already there, or you'd be drunk. You're already in the grace of God. So the foundation is your first step. This first question at step 2, do you now believe, or are you even willing to believe, they call the cornerstone. I don't know if there's any builders or guys that lay brick or anything in the room, but I believe the cornerstone on a foundation is usually the stone they put the date on, right on a building, like on a school or something, and it's the first stone put in place. My willingness to believe that there is a power greater than myself. Then there's some more stones, and they're going to call the keystone, which is the top of the arch, your third step decision. This is the keystone. Then there's some more work, and there's a foundation stone in step 12, helping others. And this is the spiritual arch. The cement is made of 2 parts, sharing in a common problem and sharing in a common solution. Imagine if all you needed was to be in a room full of people with the same problem. The county jail would have worked for a lot of us a long time ago. We need to be in rooms with people. I love when they say the newcomer is the most important person in the room, because finally I found a place where you recognized my true importance when I was new. But you know what? If the newcomer is the lifeblood, that lifeblood needs a heart to flow through. Wow. And the heart of Alcoholics Anonymous are you people that have been around and still care. Equal parts of sharing in a common problem. Do you and I really have the same problem? That's the basis of Alcoholics Anonymous. One alcoholic sitting across the table from another alcoholic, and that magic happens when you share in a common problem. But when I met my sponsor that I heard in my very first meeting, and I went to his house, I knew that he felt like me, he drank like me, he didn't know what was wrong with him when he got here. You know that awful question that some of you are still living with? What's wrong with me? I knew that he had found out the answer to that, which I really wanted, but I also knew that he had been changed. So he had a common problem with me, and he had a common solution that I wanted. That's what I wanted. I wanted to be changed. I wanted to find out the answer to that question, that after 10 treatment centers, 2 degrees, having been a therapist in a treatment center, I still did not have an answer to that question. What's wrong with me? And it comes up. You can be 15 years sober and wonder, what's wrong with me? I said I was going to do this, and this happened. I didn't want to break her heart, and I harmed her. Blah, 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 blah. What's wrong with me? And every time I've come to this work, I've found out the answer. Selfishness, self-centeredness, on and on and on. So you have the foundation in step 1. The cement made up of 2 parts, sharing in a common problem and a common solution. The cornerstone, which is your willingness to believe. The keystone, which is your third step decision. And the foundation stone, which is helping others. We've looked at the second step in 2 parts. Willingness to believe, which is one short question. Some work to face your agnosticism. Admit where you are with doubt, prejudice, and then choosing. We're going to look at the third step in 4 parts. Turn to the ABCs. I believe the first part to step 3 is, am I convinced of the ABCs? Mark read it. Before the ABCs, our description of the alcoholic is everything from the doctor's opinion to we agnostic, the chapter to the agnostic, and our personal adventures before the first drink and after the first drink, drunk or sober. My personal experience makes clear 3 pertinent ideas: that drunk or sober, I'm alcoholic and can't manage my own life. That probably no human power could have relieved my alcoholism. See, they're giving me an out there. If you're looking for an out, there it is. Probably. So if the book says probably, then maybe there's still a human power that can save me. They give you plenty of trap questions, words, to keep exploring your step zero. Maybe there's another alternative for me. Maybe I don't suffer from an illness which only a spiritual experience will conquer. Maybe there still is a human power that can relieve my alcoholism. Or maybe there isn't. Look at the question, both sides, like a coin. And do I believe that God not only can, no problem there. Even when I was new, I really didn't have much doubt that God could, at least for you, but will He? I mean, I saw it in your eyes in my first meeting. I knew that He could, but will He? For me. Because you see, I'm really unique. And I'm really bad. And I'm so much different than any of you. He probably won't work. What arrogance. You know, arrogance can lie in the middle of what you think is low self-esteem, because it really ain't low self-esteem. It's low self-esteem based on high self-esteem that you'll never live up to. We'll get to that in inventory. So, part number 1 of the third step. Am I convinced of the ABCs? Number 1. Number 2, the first requirement. What is that? Am I convinced that my life run on self-will works or doesn't? And if you're not convinced, they give you a page and a half that even when I'm in a fit spiritual condition, I really don't like reading most of the time, unless I'm reading it to someone else. And like the rest of how it works, it's not really me. I'm not really constitutionally incapable of being honest with myself until I see the obsession. I don't really suffer from grave emotional and mental disorders until I see that I do. My mental disorder is that I have a mind that will take me back to something that's going to kill me, and it'll do that in its right state, not with any intoxication and not with any alcohol in my body. I suffer from grave emotional and mental disorders. The first part of how it works describes me, not just you poor people that have to do this work, right? The first requirement, they'll give you plenty of stuff. I'm like an actor who wants to be a director, who ends up being a producer. That works a lot better in Los Angeles because they understand that. But that's really screwed up. I'm an actor who wants to be a director who ends up being a producer of confusion rather than harmony. And I always love the line, in trying to, if only people would do as I wish, the show would be great. And if you did what I wanted, not only would I be happier, that's pretty obvious, if you do what I want, I'm going to be happy, but you would be happier too if you did what I thought you should, right? What usually happens? It'll tell you exactly what usually happens. The show doesn't come off very well. So, I become a victim. Life doesn't treat me right. Self-pity. I decide to exert myself more. I'm going to try harder. I become more, on the next occasion, more demanding or gracious. It doesn't matter. I can be either one, right? Back me in a corner, I'll show you any symptom that any psychiatrist could ever describe. Right? I'm not a psychopath unless you back me up in the corner and I really have to do something, right? I'll go right back to 19 years old in the Michigan State Penitentiary. And I will say to you all that I made it through the penitentiary celibate. Very happy about that. What's my problem? Selfishness and self-centeredness. That is the root. Finally, now they've gotten past the symptoms, even deeper into the root, which is the spiritual malady, to the root of the spiritual malady, which is selfishness and self-centeredness. Driven by 100 forms of fear, self-delusion, self-seeking, self-pity. What do? I step on the toes of my fellows and they retaliate. Sometimes they hurt me with no reason. But I invariably find that at some time in the past, I have made decisions based on self which later place me in a position to be hurt. That is going to be amplified and shown to you throughout your inventory. Then, what I think, and I think Mark agrees, one of the greatest statements of hope in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. My troubles are of my own making, thank God. I thought for a long time my troubles were of somebody's making who had been dead since I was 21 years old, my dad. He was 60 years old when I was born. When I got free, that thing that used to cause me pain, his age, like when you're 10, he's 70. Now, since I've woken up a little bit, his age when I was born gives me a tremendous amount of hope for the future. Right? As of day before yesterday, I have 9 more years to follow in my dad's footsteps because I want to be able to do what he was doing when I'm 60 years old. I must be rid of this selfishness. Can I do that on my own power? You hear people all the time in these meetings telling you how they're getting free of their selfishness without God's help, on their own. Self-help. Don't you love in the media, on press or TV, when you hear AA referred to as a self-help program? I think AA is a program for people who can't help themselves. So, ABCs, part 1. First requirement, part 2. And now the third step decision. The third step decision is not the prayer. The third step decision is on the bottom of that page, and this is the how and the why of it. What do they mean, the how and the why? This is how I make the decision and why I make the decision. First, why. Why do I need to make this third step decision? Because playing God doesn't work. Why would anybody in this room decide to give their will and their life to the care of God if they still thought running their will and running their life could be successful? So doesn't it make sense the first requirement is that I be convinced that my will run on my life run on my will doesn't work? Why would you decide to get rid of it if it still worked? So that's why playing God doesn't work. I'm convinced of that. Now how? I decide. This is the third step decision. We decided. This is the third step decision. We decided that from hereafter in this life, God is going to be my director, my principal, my father. I will be his actor, his agent, and his child. Most good ideas are simple, and this concept is the keystone of this arch that we've been talking about, which will pass to freedom. Then they give you some promises that should start to happen. My sponsor never used the promises as carrots, that maybe one day they would happen, holding them out there in front of you as a motivation that leads to more greed, more selfishness. He used the promises as a checklist, and if they weren't happening to some degree, we didn't go on. If you're not experiencing these promises in your own way before you even do the prayer, based on the work you've done in 1, 2, and 3, something's missing. And they're great promises. Mark will take us through that in the meditation, I hope. Then the prayer. So, that's all I have on 1, 2, and 3, and I'd like to ask Mark to cover whatever he wants to cover before, and then take us through a guided meditation. And those who would like to, let's do the third step prayer together. Thanks.
So if you go back to your big book to page 60, earlier on the book had said that you and I must be convinced to our innermost self we're real alcoholics is the first step in recovery. And we're going to come face to face with another area that we've got to be convinced to our innermost self is, and that is that the first requirement is that I must be convinced that my life run on my self-will can already be a success. If you have time in the program, this is the part that'll kill you. Because with time, your ego, your mind-made false sense of who you are, now has a new cast of characters. But they just look a lot better. Spiritual man or woman, the sponsor, person with time, it's still manifestations of self-will. Am I convinced that my life run on my will cannot and will not work? And now the book is going to describe to you and I what this looks like when we are running our life based on self-will. And my experience is you absolutely must meet this requirement before you make the decision. I'll give you an example. A man that I was doing some work with for 14 years, he just wore me out. Just dug in like an Alabama tick to his ideas and his concepts, and he was absolutely stark raving insane when it came to women. And we got up to this place, and I just won't even go into this. And I was working with him in this idea: are you convinced your life running your will can or will not work? And the last dialogue I had, because he hung up on me and I haven't heard from him in 4 months, was I said, I tell you what, why don't you just run this thing you're doing with women until it either kills you or you drink. until you're finally willing to meet this requirement that your life run your will will not work, because there's no sense attempting to do any more work based on what you're doing. And then that's when he began to swear, cuss, and hung up on me. And I haven't heard from him in 4 months. But we were talking earlier, you'll transmit what you have, and the people that influenced Joe and I, here's what it looked like. If I bring them areas of my life in which my actions clearly indicate I'm trying to run on self-will, their standard response was, well, why don't you just do that till you can't do it no more? Have a good day. They knew better than to try and attempt to get me to, look at something else. The last marriage I was in, finally some of my pals looked at me and said, Mark, you are strangely insane when it comes to that woman. You will never be allowed to talk to us about her again. We hope you don't drink. 3 months later, did some work. That deal was done a long, long time ago, and they were absolutely right. But am I convinced that my life run on my will can already be a success? Am I willing to meet this requirement? And then they're going to describe what that looks like. And so as we go through, take a look at where you're at currently with trying to run your life based on self-will. It says, on that basis, me trying to run my life on self-will, I'm almost always in collision with something or somebody, even though I have good motives. I try to live by self-propulsion. I'm like an actor who wants to run the whole show. I'm forever trying to arrange the lights, the ballet, the scenery, and the rest of the players in my own way. Stop and start listening in meetings to how often you'll hear this. When you'll hear people share about someone who's not doing what they want, or they're not being treated right at work, or it plays out in many, many different ways. Another way I like to look at this, it's like every Sunday you and I have a script for everybody in our life that somehow is supposed to give us something that we need. The unfortunate thing is we don't mail it to them. So during the course of the week, all these different characters that your ego has come up with that you think defines who you are. For example, let's say that you're married. And let's say you're a man. So you have a script for the husband. And I assure you, the husband on Sunday night has a clear script of how the wife's supposed to be, supposed to treat him for the next 7 days. Never gives it to the wife, but starting with the first day, she'll do something that doesn't fit his third column, this script. That's just another example. The same thing happens in work. It happens in every area of your life. So we want to run the whole show. We want to arrange the lights, the ballet, the scenery, and all the rest of the players in our own way. This applies to us in our home groups, in every single area of our life. Then here's our delusion. If our arrangements would only stay put, if only people would do as I wish, the show would be great. Now I can tell you, if you want to test whether or not that's delusional, talk to these people in your life and ask them if they believe this. Here's the belief system. Everybody, including myself, would be pleased. See, I know better than you how you're supposed to live your life, what you're supposed to do, what you're not supposed to do, what you're supposed to believe, where you're supposed to go, who you're supposed to be with. You see how that lays out? See? It's a real subtle thing about how you play God in your life with people. In trying to, now it's going to talk about how I go to bring this all about. In trying to make these arrangements. Now it's going to describe my toolkit of self-will. Pay attention to some of these words. Virtuous, kind, considerate, patient, generous, even modest and self-sacrificing. Those are tools that I will use to arrange the world to my liking. See, nice drunks terrify me. Because I know better. It's just more tools in the toolkit. See? Says then I've got other tools here. I can be mean, egotistical, selfish, and dishonest. So I've got varied traits. But that's my toolkit that I'm going to use to get my way. I'm going to evaluate all this stuff in my life and how I got to arrange it. And this is my toolkit I'm going into. I'm going to be kind to this person. I'm going to be mean to this person. I'm going to be virtuous over here. Look at me. You know, in Al-Anon, they give you a tool that drunks can never do. Do something good for someone and don't let them find out. Not going to happen with an alcoholic. I'm hiring a plane. It's flying over Memphis. with a banner telling you what I have done. Ask an alcoholic to donate something anonymously. They go, what? What do you mean anonymously? I can't do it. So then it says, well, what usually happens? Well, the show doesn't come off very well. And then I begin to think life doesn't treat me right. So keep in mind, when you're in self-will, you don't know you're in self-will. Here's what happens then. You decide to exert yourself even more. So you'll become the next, we evaluate the scene, comes into our keen mind, and then we're going to look at it and decide what to do, and I'm either going to get demanding or gracious depending on how I evaluate what I need to do to get my way. Still, the play does not suit me. So admitting I may be somewhat at fault, I am sure that other people are more to blame. And now you come to my meeting, and what you do is you become angry and indignant and full of self-pity. And by the way, when you're in self-will, this is going to be your natural emotional progression when you don't get your way. It will start with anger, it will move to indignance, and then we'll move to self-pity, and then you'll start sharing in meetings. Because the victim shows up. What is our basic trouble? And here they're going to start asking some very powerful questions. Am I not really a self-seeker even when trying to be kind? Think about that. Think about that. I told people this, the only time I do something without a selfish motive is by mistake. You're the same way. Here's what I know. I'm very selfish, and so are you, and I know that right from the get-go. The only time I have ever done anything in all the years I've been sober without a selfish motive is by mistake. I go to some meeting, some guy comes up afterwards, we just talk for a while. Maybe I'm able to help him in some way, right? By mistake. Wasn't planned. Trust me, if I'm gonna work with somebody in my house and go through the steps, it's for a selfish motive. Is it not? See? You have to sit and look at that. It goes on to say, am I not a victim of the delusion? If you've never looked up the word delusion, please do so. It means a belief system held in spite of evidence to the contrary. I'm a victim of the delusion that I'll be satisfied and happy in this world if I only manage well. That's almost killed me. That's just almost killed me. And that goes on to say, is it not evident to all the rest of these people around me? These are the things I want, and do not my actions make these people wish to retaliate? And then the book's going to start to shift and turn the light on me. I am self-centered, egocentric as people like to call it nowadays. And now, I don't know if we'll do Theater of the Lie, but they kind of lay out this, this Theater of the Lie concept. You got a retired businessman, he's down in Florida, and all he's doing is bitching about the sad state of the nation. You have a minister, and all he's doing is sighing over the sins of the 20th century. I told a minister one time he'd be in trouble if there weren't any sins. He wouldn't have a job. He'd have to work for a living. Do you understand? Politicians and reformers are sure all be utopia if the rest of the world behave. Outlaw, safecracker, thinks society has wronged him. Alcoholic, lost on, locked up. But whatever my protestations, am I not concerned with myself, my resentments, or my self-pity? Now keep in mind, they're describing you and I when we're living a life based on self-will in any area of our life.
I prayed that he have everything that I want. Come on.
Yeah.
All I wanted for him was to be sober. Even when your motives are good.
Or another one, there's a story in the book that I've heard over the years in meetings. The guy talked about, he prayed for someone for 2 weeks. Right? The story's in the book, right? We've all heard that. One day, and that never ever sat with me, and I didn't know why. And one day I realized, that guy doesn't have the problem. I'm the one with the resentment that's going to die the alcoholic death. I need my prayers, not him. That person isn't even thinking about me. Hasn't thought about me in a long time. Now I knew why it didn't fit. What am I doing praying for him? He or she's probably just fine. I better get to work. I better write a 4-column inventory and find out my part. Read it to somebody. Look at my defects and go make amends if I owe the amends. Right? So selfishness and self-centeredness, that we think is the root of all of our troubles. Now, I want you to think about this in relationship to inventory and self-will. Earlier I made a comment. Is it possible that you're sober, quote, making choices, but maybe you're not making choices? And you have the word driven. Look up the word driven. When I'm into self-will, my experience is I'm going through life being driven. Choice and driven do not fit in the same circle. When I'm being driven, my choices arise out of the fact that I'm being driven. Driven by what? 100 forms. Think of it this way. I'm going to do inventory backwards. Here's my fourth column. I'm driven by 100 forms of fear, self-delusion, self-seeking, and self-pity. My fourth column. That forces me into some course of action. I step on the toes of my fellows. First column. They retaliate. Second column. Sometimes they hurt me. Third column. Seemingly without provocation. I didn't do anything. But I can always find at some time in the past I made decisions based on self, and I've gone full circle, which later placed me in a position to be hurt. So my troubles, I think, are all of my own making. Look up the word driven. When you're in self-will, you're going through life being driven. Here's the way I like to think of it. Visuals work for me. The limo pulls up in front of your house. You go out and get in. Driver turns around. He says, "Hi, Mark. My name's Fear, and I'm going to drive your ass today." And the next day it's self-seeking. And the next day it's self-pity. And that's exactly, when I'm into self-will, exactly what it looks like. I have no say in it, none whatsoever. I'm being driven. I just get in the limo, and depending on what's going on or what it looks like and how much self-will is going on, I'm going to be driven. So my troubles are my own making. My troubles arise out of me, and I am an extreme example of self-will run riot, though I do not think so. Now, if you've been sober for a while, you want to know if this is going on. Go to some people and ask them. I don't know. Oh, can you hear? There we go. If you want to find out if any of this is going on, yourself will run riot, though we don't think so, go to 5 or 10 people you interact with and ask them this question. It's a great question. How am I showing up to you? If the majority tell you you're showing up as self-will, you are showing up as self-will. And then the book says, above everything, that you and I must be rid of selfishness, I must or it will kill me. Here's the connection between this sentence and dying an alcoholic death. If you and I don't quit playing God, if we don't quit trying to arrange the show, if we don't quit trying to impose our will on all these people in our lives and ourselves and the world, what's going to happen is that the world and its people are not going to do what we want, and that's going to bring about something the big book calls a spiritual malady. We're going to get so diseased and so uncomfortable and so resentful, I'm going to get blocked from that which keeps me from drinking. And then one day my mind is going to plant a little thought in that, Mark, I know what'll make this pain go away. And I'm going to go take a drink of alcohol and activate a phenomenon called craving, and I'm headed toward an alcoholic death. And that is the connection between selfishness and dying an alcoholic death. That's why the book says, above everything, Mark, above everything. You all know what those two words mean? Above everything. I must be rid of my selfishness. If you are sitting in this room and you're a real alcoholic, alcohol is not your problem. This is your problem. It's critical you see the connection between your selfishness and dying an alcoholic death. Why? Because it will give you a clear understanding about the work you're going to do in steps 4 through 9 and the practices of 10 and 11. Your self-will cannot defeat your self-will. The selfishness that is within you right now that you are acting on, you cannot do anything about. Only that which created it can destroy it. And that is God. And we come face to face with that with the work we do in 4 through 9. Next sentence says, God makes that possible. My name and your name is not in there. What has me blocked from God, what has me creating the spiritual malady, my selfishness, I can do nothing about on my own power. It says there often seems no way of entirely getting rid of self without God's aid. I had moral and philosophical convictions galore, but I can't live up to them no matter how much I try on my own power. And then this incredible sentence, I had to have God's help. Now I understand. Now I understand why I'm going to make this decision and move through the work. I'm crystal clear. I see the connection between the root of my problem and my selfishness and dying an alcoholic death. And I had to have God's help. It's not an option. I had to have God's help. So this is how I'm going to get God's help. I'm going to quit playing God. A great exercise that you could do is get a notebook and at the top of the page write, how am I playing God right now, today, in my life? And look at every area of your life and see if you can identify ways in which you're playing God. If you're like me, you're going to find a bunch. So I'm going to quit playing God. Here's the paradox. You cannot get God's help if you think you're God. That's why it says, I had to have God's help. And then it says, this is how I'm going to get it. I'm going to quit playing God. Why? Because you playing God doesn't work. So now we're going to make this decision. I'm going to decide that hereafter in this drama of life, God's going to be my director. So that means I'm the actor. God's the principal. I am the agent. God's the father. I am his child. Most good ideas are simple, and this concept is the keystone. Joe talked about that. The keystone is what holds all the rest of the stones in place on the arch. This is the keystone of the new and triumphant arch through which I pass to freedom. This is my third step decision, the bottom of page 62. It is not the prayer. The prayer is an affirmation of a decision that you and I have to sit with. And here's the decision. I've looked at everything up to this point in time, and the decision is about this relationship with this power. And this relationship is that God is going to direct my life and I'm going to be the actor. God is the principal, I am the agent. God is the father, I am his child. If you've never looked up those words, look up those words. They're very powerful. Can you imagine being, if God is the principal and you're the agent, can you imagine being an agent for Michael Jordan, where he will empower you to act for him? That's what happens in this program. Later on in the fear inventory, it says, Mark, you're going to let God demonstrate through you what God can do. Joe and I have known each other for a long time. We were pitiful, incomprehensible, demoralized human beings when we came to this program. Do you think we have any capacity to do anything like what we're doing here this weekend? We are letting God demonstrate through us what God can do. That's what this relationship is about, as principle of an agent. Earlier on, the book said, Mark, start regarding yourself as an intelligent agent, spearhead of God's ever-advancing creation. Stand in the light and the power of that. See, God's the father, I'm the child. Think of that dynamics of that relationship. See? God's the director, I'm the actor. All you got to do is think of some movie and see how that plays out. And that becomes this cornerstone that I'm going to move through the rest of my life with. My experience is I made the third step decision once and once only. Now, I've since gone back and recommitted to this decision. But I made this decision early on in my recovery. I made that decision because my attempts at playing God had failed miserably, drunk and sober. So I made this decision here, and then I begin to take the course of action as outlined in the rest of the book so that I begin to finally experience this relationship the third step is talking about. So what I'd like to do is I'd like all of us to get in a comfortable position with your feet on the floor. Close your eyes. I want to do a review here of the first three steps. And then at the end of that, we'll have a little bit of silence. And then for those who would like to, you can join me in saying the third step prayer, and then we'll be able to close out for our lunch here. Okay? Our loving Creator, we Thank you for bringing us together in fellowship and love. Be with us and guide us as we see these connections of these first 3 steps so that we can make a decision and say a prayer which is indicative of our willingness to move forward through the rest of the work. Help us to see and understand that we have a threefold illness. An illness of the body, in which I take a drink and the drink takes me. That manifested itself many, many years before I ever got to AA, and that knowledge of that will not keep me from drinking because I lose the memory of that. Help me to understand that the most insane thing that I will do sober. And that is that I have a mind that will take me back to a drink, and that at certain times I'm absolutely powerless. Help me to get free of the delusion that I think I know what that time looks like. Whether I've been sober one day or whether I've been sober 40 years, help me to understand that. Help me to understand how desperately I need power on a daily basis. Help me to see and understand my current spiritual malady. Where am I having trouble in personal relationships? My emotional natures, being a prey to misery and depression, not being satisfied with my life, being full of fear and feeling useless and unhappy. Help me to touch that, Father. Help me to see all of those areas currently in my life. Help me to understand my need for power based on my first step experience. Once I recognize that need for power and I'm left with 2 options, die an alcoholic death or live on a spiritual basis, I have to become willing to believe in a power greater than myself that can take me past here, free me from my concepts and my ideas and my prejudices, and help us to do that. And then faced with a self-imposed crisis I can no longer postpone or avoid, that you're going to be everything and that you're going to be nothing, what is my choice to be? And help me to realize there is no choice, that you're going to have to be everything in my life based on that first step experience. The promise is that if I'm just willing to seek you, that you will disclose yourself to me and help me to trust that. Help me to stop defining and comprehending your power, God, so you are so far beyond all that. Help me just be open to an experience with you that is beyond my comprehension. Help me to understand and to meet the requirement of the 3rd step, which is that my life run on my will cannot and will not work. Help me to see how I consistently go through life. Before I came to AA and after AA, constantly trying to arrange the show, suffering from the delusion I'll be happy and satisfied. Going around with the idea all the time that I know who's supposed to be in my life and for how long, and where I'm supposed to live, and the condition of my health and my pocketbook, and trying to manage and run that all of the time. Help me to see that selfishness and self-centeredness is at the root of all my troubles. And that as a result of that, I go through life being driven by 100 forms of fear and self-delusion, self-seeking, and self-pity. The end result of that is I constantly step on the toes of my fellows and they retaliate. Help me to fully understand that all my troubles are my own making, that they arise from within myself, and that I'm self will run riot, though I'm delusional about that, and that above everything I have to get rid of this selfishness or it's going to kill me. Help me to see and to understand and be convinced that I can't do anything about that on my own power, then I had to have God's help. Help me to see and understand that I have to quit playing God, that I'm willing to let go of that I'm willing to completely let go of running my life on my self-will, because it didn't work. To understand this incredible relationship, that from this point on, God, as I understand, God is going to direct my life and I'm the actor. That God is going to be the principal, and that I'm going to be an agent of that power. That God is going to be the father, and that I'm going to be the child. And that God is going to be the employer, and that I'm going to be the employee. And that if I'll sincerely take this position, if I'm willing to make this decision and follow through with the work, that all sorts of remarkable things will happen. I will become less and less interested in myself and more interested in my fellow human beings. I'll receive guidance and direction and power in every single area of my life. So Heavenly Father, our Creator, let us sit in the next minute or so and sit with this decision if we want to do this, to take this incredible leap of faith into the unknown, if you will. Help us to understand what's behind us if we don't. And at the end of that, those who care to join me in the third step prayer. God, I offer myself to Thee, to build with me and to do with me as Thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self, that I may better do Thy will. Take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those I would help of Thy power, Thy love, and Thy way of life. May I do Thy will always. We will see you after lunch.
1:30. Hi, everybody.
Oop, is it on?